And we are live, Senators.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is January 28th, 2022. For legislators, make sure you get your expenses in today. We are in remote capacity. And so for those of you who are coming to testify before us, potentially for the first time altogether, or that you've never been with us on YouTube, I'm going to start off by saying we have an unknown audience watching us. People actually do show up to look at these committee proceedings, and I was shocked to learn some of the numbers. But when you are testifying here today, while you may have been before us in the past, and we understand your terminology for various things, I'm going to take the position that there's a lot of people out there on YouTube that have no idea what we're generally talking about. So I try to keep the conversation as easy and as low as possible for people to understand in plain English who you are and what we're all talking about here today. And if you happen to start speaking in a way that I may understand and you may understand, but I red flag it in my brain for somebody out there thinking, what does that mean? I may interrupt you and ask you to explain what X, Y, or Z, an acronym, happens to be. We're here to talk about a couple of things, primarily this afternoon, Section 13 of the Capital Bill. We're going to talk about the Big E, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all of the updates and whether there's actual progress taking place there. We have several witnesses who are with us. Abby Willard, I see that you are the first listed on my screen. I don't know whether that's something that is in sync with what you thought was going to happen here this afternoon, if there were other people who wanted to take the lead. But I'm going to say first, welcome to Senate Institutions. And secondly, when you do introduce yourself, if you could let everybody know who you are, little brief bio, and let the people on YouTube, let them know who you are as we get underway. So if you are not planning to take the lead and are going to hand it off to somebody else, I'd like to know that too. But otherwise, welcome to Senate Institutions, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Benning. Appreciate the invitation to join you today. My name is Abby Willard. I'm the Director of the Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And I was planning to go first, so I'm glad the agenda reflected that. I do want to just start by saying I've had some unstable internet for the past few months for some reason, so the audio will cut out and you won't be able to hear me at times. So just wave so that I know that's happening. I don't get any indication on my end, and then I'll just pause for a minute and it always comes back a couple of seconds later.
I appreciate that heads up, because this morning on Senate Judiciary, Senator Sears was having the same problem, and he kept saying, I'm unstable. And he wasn't referencing his internet. He was just telling people he was unstable. So we get some enjoyment out of that.
These are unusual times,
Yes.
depending on how you think about it. So I've been at the agency since 2011. The development division does a variety of roles of marketing local product, supporting Vermont producers, and promoting the products in a variety of venues, including the Vermont Building at the Big E, which is pretty unusual in that it's located in West Springfield, Massachusetts.
So probably
today
we're Abby, if I could stop you right there. You and I know
Sure.
what that is, but there may be folks on YouTube who don't know what the Big E actually stands for.
Right. So that's what we hope we could share with you all today, but it stands
Great.
for Eastern States Exposition, in shortcut titled the Big E. And Vermont actually owns and manages a building at the Avenue of States in West Springfield, Massachusetts at the Big E. And so we thought we would share a little bit about the Eastern States Exposition and the Vermont Building, talk a bit about the history, talk about what happened in 2021 when the event actually happened, give some updates on the major maintenance focus that we have for the current fiscal year as well as planned for fiscal years 23 and beyond. And then talk about a next generation plan that we have for architectural and engineering design vision for the building. Then both of those items being captured in the capital budget adjustment act proposed budget for FY23. How does that sound to you, Chairman Benning, and to the rest of the committee?
You're doing wonderfully so far. At the end of your
Okay.
conversation, though, I may ask you, how close is the Big E to the former Indian motorcycle plant? You probably don't know that.
And I hope that one of my amazing staff can answer that question.
I'm on it.
Eric's got it. Okay. Well, I'll start by saying we were really glad to have vendors and staff and folks back in the Vermont Building down at Eastern States Exposition and be open to fairgoers and the public in 2021. We had over 1.5 million attendees go through the fair in September 2021, which was a wonderful experience given that the fair was closed in 2020. The events didn't happen due to the pandemic. And as Emily Lipowski and others will share, this was one of very few times that the Big E didn't occur. The other two times were during World War I and World War II. So this is a monumental time to have the event closed last year and then open this past September again. We did have the opportunity to invite both this committee as well as House Corrections and Institutions down for a walkthrough of the building. Chairman Benning, I don't think you were able to join for that day, but Chair Emmons did make it down and was able to visit the Vermont Building as well as the Avenue of the States. And so we just want to extend that invitation to all committee members after this presentation. If you're so intrigued to come and visit the Vermont Building at some point, encourage you to do so. It's a really unique building. It's a special place and a real opportunity to see a marketplace that Vermont products and producers are showcased outside of our state borders. So we know the dates for the fair for 2022. So it's September 16th through October 3rd. And there's always a Vermont Day celebration on the second Saturday, I believe. So that I think would be September 24th. Emily can correct me if it's looking to be otherwise. But that could be a nice day when there's extra activities and occurrences happening in the building and outside on the lawn in front of the building, if you're curious. So an opportunity in the future to have you get a chance down to see the building. So I wanted to acknowledge and introduce that we have a team of staff at the Agency of Agriculture, part of our marketing team, that manage the Big E in the Vermont Building. They engage with all the vendors that sell their projects and products. And Laura Ginsburg and Emily Lipowski are both here today to be a part of testimony, as they're the real subject matter experts about the work that our agency does down in West Springfield. And then also acknowledging that we have a wonderful and unique relationship with Building and General Services. And we've got a great team from BGS that help manage all the on-site maintenance and bring all the expertise about how to keep the building in its best and ideal operating condition. So we have Joe Asia and Jessica Time and Eric and Jeremy here today, and a subset of them I think will join in our presentation if the committee welcomes that. So what I had hoped to do is we'd shared earlier in the week with Alex and with the committee a PowerPoint presentation that we would love to share with you and those watching today about the building and a little bit more about what is this Eastern States Exposition in the Vermont Building. We also sent over earlier today a floor plan that's not actually in the PowerPoint presentation, but a floor plan of the different vendors in the building that could be helpful when we get into some of the logistics about major maintenance and plan changes for the building.
Great.
So I'd love to turn it over to Emily Lipowski if you welcome her to get us into some of the more details.
Absolutely. Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself, and do you need to screen share?
I would be happy to share the presentation.
Go ahead and pull it up here.
I've given you the screen share privileges, so you should be good to go.
Thank you,
And in
Alex.
the meantime, Abby has the answer.
She does.
Oh, you
Okay.
sent it just to me, Eric? You
I
did. I
wanted
thought
to
you
make
sent
you
it
look
to everyone.
smart.
Oh, so Eric's answering your question, Chair Benning, 3.9 miles
Okay.
to the
Now,
Indian motorcycle place, but you have to cross the river. So bring a canoe, or maybe it'll
Okay.
take you a little bit longer.
So the company went out of business, I believe, roughly 1953. But all of you happen to know somebody who owns an Indian motorcycle from around World War II. Can you guess who that might be?
Is that under the Institutions Committee purview?
Governor.
Senator
Is that your
Perry
man?
gets the plum prize for this afternoon. Yes, Governor Phil Scott has an Indian motorcycle, just so you know.
It looks like it's a barbecue joint now.
Ah,
Oh, that would be sad. They had a wonderful little museum there.
Well, you may find this surprising, but I have an Indian motorcycle leather jacket that I will wear for my next testimony before this committee.
Very good. I'm impressed. You get point.
Mr. Chairman, I have a DVD of the wild one.
Okay.
That's Brando. That's Marlon Brando on it.
Yeah, that's notable, but you don't get as many points as somebody with an Indian jacket. That's
That's true.
definitely points. I'm sorry. Where were we?
Can everyone see the screen with the Eastern States Exposition and Big E logo all right?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay,
Laura.
perfect. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here. It's very nice to virtually meet all of you. For the record, I'm Emily Lipowski. I'm the Marketing and Export Program Lead for the Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I thought I'd go ahead and kick off our presentation by running through some background information about the Big E, as well as last year's fair season. So the Eastern States Exposition is located in West Springfield, Massachusetts, as we had just been discussing. It provides year-round opportunities for the development and promotion of agriculture, education, industry, family entertainment, while preserving the New England heritage. The Big E came to life in the beginning of the 20th century out of the culmination of Joshua Brooks' visionary idea of having state buildings at the fair that would unite the agricultural and industrial parts of the exposition and showcase traditional and new products and attractions that really make each New England state unique. The Big E is held annually in September and runs 17 days. Each year, it sees over 1 million visitors in attendance and is the largest agricultural event in New England, as well as the 5th largest in America. And within the Eastern States Fairgrounds, you will see the Avenue Estates. The Avenue is what makes the Big E a truly regional event, with each of the 6 New England states represented by a building that displays each state's character and products. Many of these buildings replicate their original state house, and it is the only fair in the nation where more than one state participates. The Vermont Building itself was built in 1929, and it's the 3rd building constructed on the Avenue. On May 15th, 1929, the Eastern States Exposition signed a warranty deed to the state of Vermont for the parcel of land that the Vermont Building stands on. And the year-round management of this building is a shared responsibility and coordination between the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets and the Vermont Building and General Services as outlined in Title 10, Chapter 5, Sections 51 and 52.
So Emily, let me interrupt for a moment. You said the parcel of land that the building sits on was actually sold to the state of Vermont?
That is correct. Even though we are the building is located in West Springfield, Massachusetts, when you are in the Vermont Building on the Avenue Estates, you are technically on Vermont's land.
So here's an interesting little curveball question for you. If you are in that building and you commit a crime, are you prosecuted in a Vermont court or a Massachusetts court?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I do know in a lot of the permits and everything for the vendors inside, food permits, health and safety, all goes through the town of West Springfield, Massachusetts. So it's a bit of a gray area, but
Any
We do.
lawyer would know that answer.
Well, it came to my mind because I was once standing where the Magna Carta was signed in England. And on that plot of land, there is a little tiny plot of land that was donated to the United States upon the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I've often wondered if something were to happen on that plot of land, where would the individual be prosecuted? It's just a fun little question to think about. Sorry, I'm a lawyer by trade, so I try to inject these little bits of curious.
He's looking for work.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Emily. This is Friday.
Not a
We try to
problem.
be humorous here on
That's
Friday
great.
afternoon.
I appreciate that.
I'd also, looking at the photos you've got, was it the same architect that built both Maine's and Vermont's buildings?
That's also a great question. I don't know the answer to that one either. That I'd have to look up.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then that brings us to the Vermont Building during the Big E. So during the Big E, which brings in approximately 1.5 million people each year, which Abby had stated, the Vermont Building is home to a variety of food and retail businesses, which showcase the best of what Vermont has to offer, and is really a great opportunity for those Vermont businesses to expand their market and increase their brand recognition outside of the state.
How many people go through our building?
We can roughly estimate. It's unfortunately we don't have any tracking in place, but we do estimate. It's on a later slide. I don't want to give you the wrong number, but
Okay.
one of the other buildings within the avenue.
I thought we had a count or something. No, okay.
Senator Mazza, are you planning on introducing an amendment to the Capitol bill to get a little head counter in the front door down there?
We should have that we know exactly how many people are going. I know our vendors do well. Just curious to see how many people go through our building.
Well, I know where there's 1.5 million we could shift.
We would welcome that.
Okay.
All right, so getting into a little bit more of the past year, the Big E really has only been canceled for that duration of World War I during those years, during World War II, as well as in 2020 to the COVID pandemic. It has been held despite the flood of 1936, the hurricane of 1938, and the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. And the 2021 fair season had its share of curveballs as COVID continued to impact the world, as we all know. In the spring of 2021, we waited for the official word from the eastern states that the Big E was indeed happening, and we did not receive that confirmation until much later in the spring, well after those vendor decisions would have typically been made. It required some quick and creative action from the agency in order to fill the building for the 2021 fair. The building managers were able to prepare the building with suggested health and safety measures, including some signage for both customers and vendors, creating a traffic flow map to ensure that traffic was going one way through the building, and some additional supplies to help mitigate the spread of germs. The Big E did require guests to wear a mask while inside the buildings on the fairgrounds. However, it did not require masks in outdoor spaces. And we had extended space to all of the vendors who had applied in 2020. However, several did make the difficult decision. 3 vendors had made that decision not to return, as well as 5 vendors who would not return for the 2021 fair due to staffing constraints and COVID concerns. However, many of those vendors are planning to return for 2022. And despite all of those challenges, 9 of the vendors returned for the 2021 fair, and we even had 7 new vendors who helped fill the Vermont Building with new and exciting products.
What do we charge them? So much a foot or our gross receipts?
The commissions, it's based on a commission structure. So I believe it's 12% commission based off of their sales at the fair. And here we have a sales comparison between 2019 and 2021. And you'll see that although we had 9 less vendors and overall fair attendance was down past year, it was still a successful year for the vendors who had exhibited in the building. We had also received feedback from many of these vendors that although that attendance was down and it wasn't at the shoulder to shoulder capacity like prior years, it allowed them to really have longer, more meaningful interactions with guests, which we believe ultimately led to increased sales in many instances.
That's a big decrease in sales, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
We cannot confirm it, but we do believe that the mask mandates had also discouraged some people from coming into indoor spaces. So that we believe that was a factor that also played into last year's sales. But fortunately, a lot of the vendors did appreciate having some more time to interact with guests and really talk about their products in more depth. And looking at the broad overview of this past season's numbers, there were just over 1.5 million total fair visitors, about 369,303 of which were estimated to walk through the Avenue of States buildings. Although we can't confirm, as I had mentioned, those mask mandates and increased COVID concerns, we believe did deter some of those visitors from walking through the Avenue buildings. But despite all of that, the average daily sales per vendor was over $3,500, which is, although lower than years prior, still pretty comparable, all things considered. And through all of the challenges, the 2021 fair season did have a number of success stories. The first of which was one of our first-time vendors, Better Wheel Workshops from Newfane, Vermont. Better Wheel is a proud tree-to-table company who crafts the now famous Woodsy, as well as coasters, earrings, ornaments, and much more. At the Big E, they were approached by a couple national retail representatives who were interested in their products, including the likes of Wayfair and LL Bean. And a second success story comes from a longtime vendor, Village Peddler, who crafts caramel and chocolate dip apples, fudge, caramel corn, and many other sweet treats. In 2021, their sales were up 25%, and the Monty family proudly reported that it was their most successful year in their long history as vendors in the building. So these success stories really help amplify the opportunity and impact that the vending in the Vermont Building has for both new and returning vendors during the Big E event. And this all pretty much leads to the real reason why that we're here today. So to talk about the work that's ahead of us to be able to continue to provide the Big E building, Vermont Building, as a safe and unforgettable experience for both vendors and visitors alike. And from here, I'd like to kick it over to Abby Willard, who will walk us through more details about the Vermont Building's renovation needs. Thank you.
We're happy to keep going through the presentation. I just have a few slides that show photos about what the interior of the building looks like when it's in use and times when it's vacant, and then thinking it may make sense to pass to BGS to talk specifically about the budget pieces. But we wanted to just show a few more photos that represent some of the physical building renovation and deterioration needs. So you can see these photos that were taken last fall when we did the Vermont Building walkthrough with that group noted there on the left. So you can see some of the rot and deterioration in the window frames along the columns that are in the front of the building, as well as some of the other wooden molding and parts of the building that are looking pretty worn and clearly in need of some basic maintenance and restoration. So those are some photos from the outside of the building. On the inside, so the photo on the left is clearly showing the shoulder-to-shoulder flow through the building when it's full. So I think this photo was taken in 2019. Mostly you're seeing one side of the building, and there's sort of a divide in the middle of the photo there, and then kind of the crowd circles around and kind of continues in its flow through the building and into the next building in the Avenue of the States. So, one thing we want to note is that, when the building walkthrough occurred and when others have visited the Vermont Building, it really is touted as the best building on the Avenue of the States. And when you walk into the building, it has this really clear Vermont feel. It's really cozy, has nice wood accents. the overall message is really kind of the Vermont style. And that's accompanied by criticisms oftentimes of the other buildings along the avenue that don't have some of those same kind of state identifying features. So they sometimes appear too modern. They don't have as many vendors actually selling product or offering food samples. It's more focused as a food court, or the lighting is too dark. So we do have really many wonderful attributes and successes to preserve in the Vermont Building.
It'd been nice to have
But
the
when
chair's
the fair-
picture there. Mr. Chair, it'd been nice to have you standing there, you know?
Yeah, so kind of thing a lieutenant governor should be doing at the very least.
That's what, next year you'll probably be standing there.
Okay.
Okay.
Make a point of it.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
That's great. So you can see when the fair's full, you get this sense that vendors are really, or excuse me, fairgoers are really pushed through the flow of vendors. And you can imagine that there's not a lot of time for lingering and taking food samples and making sales when the building is so full. You can also see on the photos to the right that many of the booths look quite worn. There's discongruent kind of themes about the structures. There's different floor surfaces. And again, that divide through the center of the building that really kind of concentrates flow in a somewhat narrower tribute to the Vermont style. In 2021, is my audio still working?
You're back now. Oh, now you're not.
How is it now?
There you go.
I hear you.
Because we had fewer people in the building, I think we saw that certain vendors did have more lingering visitors. Some vendors even sold out of product. You heard from one example that Emily shared that actually had their best year at the fair ever. Because of the mask mandate, sampling wasn't allowed in the building. So while the mask mandate may have deterred people from entering the building, we also suspect that not allowing sampling also deterred sales, and that fairgoers were not as adventurous in purchasing product that they maybe didn't have a chance to sample or taste previously. I will note that if the committee is ever interested, we reached out to some vendors that were a nice representation of the products and the history of tenure in the building and asked if they would be open to providing testimony. And they all said yes, that they'd love to come in, visit with your committee and share what their experience has been and the benefit on their business model to be a vendor at the Big E in the Vermont Building. So reach out if that's of interest to the committee at a later time.
You have a waiting list for people to get in?
Say again, Dick?
Do they have a waiting list for folks to get in, or vendors?
Yeah, so Emily can probably talk about this in greater detail, but each year, or at least current policy is that there's an annual application for vendors to apply to vend in the Vermont Building. And so we're in that process now in selecting and receiving applications for the 2022 fair season.
Okay, thank you.
So Abby, I'm going to ask my committee assistant, Alex, to reach out to you and grab a list of the folks who might be interested in coming in. The only requirement, of course, is that they all bring in a sample for each of us of whatever it is they produce.
I'm sure they can find a way to do that in this virtual environment. They've
Well,
gotten really great at their digital marketing.
We can plan it for later in the year when hopefully we'll be back in the building.
Even better. Yeah, we'd be happy to share those names.
Great.
So this next slide, thanks, Emily. I'll just touch on very briefly and then propose handing over the next few following slides to BGS. So there has been ongoing major maintenance needs in the Vermont building for quite some time. And as the building approaches 100 years old.
Let me ask Senator McCormick to mute himself. There we go.
Okay.
Go ahead and mute it. In.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I was double tasking. What is the question?
The question was you need to mute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you knew I was multitasking. I'm sorry.
Right. Sorry, Abby, it's Friday afternoon.
I like it. I think it actually is a nice, kind of comfortable style of testimony. We appreciate it. So this is a long list of the renovation needs that are kind of well past overdue and represent the need of bringing this building back into both code and in optimal operation. And so recently the focus has been building kind of the building back from kind of the bones and the structure first, and then over time developing a plan and dedicating resources to more of the interior components, as well as this modernization objective that we have for the building going forward. And many of our goals are to see by 2029 at the 100-year anniversary, having, you know, a new face and a real modern view for the building to be both restored and safe and in a good condition of maintenance. So that's our ultimate goal by 2029. The next few slides are very specifically related to the budget adjustment requests, and I'd welcome our BGS partners to lead on this section, and we're happy to fill in if there's questions.
Chair,
So,
Yes, go ahead, Dick.
what's the revenue? How much do you receive from the vendors a year total?
that'd be a great question for Emily. I bet she may not have the exact number in front of her,
And
but
what
I'm
do we-
sure she can
and
give you a
where does
range.
where does the money go, whatever is received?
Fortunately, I don't have the last year's revenue in front of me. I'd be happy to look that up and send it your way.
Does that also go back into infrastructure improvements, the money that's received?
Yes. Yep. So it goes, some of it goes back into the building itself, as well as staffing for the building as well.
I think that breakdown would be important to see how much money is received from the vendors.
Is that possible?
Yes. Yep.
Absolutely.
I'll collect
Okay,
some
and-
information and send it your way
Sure.
this afternoon.
By the way, I meant to say, we get the capital bill from our counterparts in the House right around crossover time. And so there's always the probability that many of the figures you're using here today as you make your pitch to the House will be altered in some fashion. And in the event that something happens, reach out and ask to reschedule in front of us so we can actually clean up whatever they've done that hasn't fallen in favor with you. But it also gives you an opportunity to come back and answer some of these questions, knowing that you wouldn't have those answers right at the tip of your fingertips at this point in time.
If you are prepared to talk about the request, major maintenance, we will not focus, as Senator Benning spoke, on the dollar amount. My name's Jessica Time. I'm with BGS. I'm a project manager and architect. Senator, are you ready for discussion?
We are ready to go.
Okay. So what's being shown is the money that we've received in past years, as well as the governor's recommend, which has not, the legislators recommend has not made it to your floor yet. However, what we are looking at is that the pace of investment in this building has led to an accumulation of need. And that also aligns with AG's needs for modernization within the building. However, we have a major maintenance request and a renovation request. For major maintenance, which I think also helps us understand what's been going on in this building recently, which has led to requests for renovation. The condition now is that a roof project has been part of the request for several years. However, budget requirements for other competing things like vendor changeover and code requirements that had been discovered back in, I think, 2020 are ongoing and continue to take money away from that. So the hot water distribution project, we could actually advance to the next slide regarding major maintenance spending for FY 2022 and 2023. We have a hot water system distribution project that is ready to go to bid. And that will be using most of the funds from both fiscal year 2022 and 2023. And as I kind of mentioned, this is ongoing mechanical and electrical maintenance that was triggered by electrical failures and code requirements, and now includes health concerns regarding the availability of hot water. The hot water system will also help our situation with electrical supply, as we were early notified while we were doing electrical repairs. Well, if you update your hot water infrastructure, you'll automatically be using less energy. And right now there is a restriction and we just don't have enough supply. So that project, the one under number 1, includes engineering, code sinks, and hood replacement. And discovered at the end of last year was that we also need freezer repairs, and we'll be completing electrical repairs with that money. So we are asking for additional funds if it makes it to the Senate with this request. Those funds would continue to be for slate roof replacement, which has been part of the request. We just, again, haven't gotten to enjoy this since I think a little background here would be that the vendor selection is made in maybe March. And BGS is notified then if there's turnover, so money that's given to BGS or appropriated to BGS in January. In March, we find out, oh, there's a big change because of vendor turnover, and then that takes up some of the money. So the slate roof replacement would eliminate our highest priority concerns as we enter into discussion over larger renovations. We are also using the item 3 on this list, a portion of the major maintenance money to continue to study the needs to renovate the building and include the needs for the next 50 years. And AG is also doing a study at the same time that would support their needs. So if there's questions on the fiscal year 2023, I also have a presentation, short presentation on BGS's view of the renovation.
Anybody have any questions for Jess at this time? I guess you're good to go.
Okay. We're losing people, aren't we? That's not the goal. Okay.
It's probably not your fault.
Senator McCormick is present. All right. So, again, we're at 100 years and we need to ramp up investment in the building. We're already asking for this to happen with major maintenance for needs that are present. But there's also a lot of work that we need to get to, and we need to strip functions interior to get to, and we'd like to do it all at once. So the work that's already been done in the building has been limited. We've been painting. This is capital bill money that's been spent in the past years to paint, to replace the rear membrane roof, to do a backstage improvement, fire alarm and ventilation changes, as well as roof repairs and booth alterations. But in recent years, we've found that the paint is no longer holding on the front facade. There are capital repairs that include structural and movement cracks and continued electrical and hot water repairs, which are by no means done. So this is the situation we find ourselves in as we're contemplating how to treat this building in the next 50 years. And as mentioned before, vendor turnover is pushing us to do additional code upgrades. The Vermont Building is meant to showcase Vermont vendors and tourism, but it was also designed to showcase Vermont slate and Vermont brick and Danby marble. But the exterior maintenance items that are visible continue to require investment to keep that function going. The appearance of the building right now, and from the outside in particular, appears pretty sad. It's a sad representation of the state of Vermont, particularly the peeling paint, which is a condition in older buildings of the wood no longer being able to be painted. So you have to replace wood. As we plan for the renovation and investment is made in the building, we have to realize that there's also code additional improvements that are required. We'll be studying what those are. And as mentioned before, we're using a small portion of the major maintenance money to study those improvements that will be required by code and other triggered requirements. So we anticipate that the improvements to the exterior, interior, and booths will include accessible spaces and structural improvements, as well as completion of deferred maintenance that is beneath the visible finishes, and the modernization that ag requires to have something like a counter on their door, which has been discussed and ruled out because of building limitations. So if there are questions, we anticipate a lot of questions going into this, as well as tours of the building and getting people up to speed on what it looks like today.
Committee, I can only see three of you. Anybody have any questions? Senator Ingalls.
Maybe you said it earlier, but how many vendors typically are there for the days of the fair?
Senator Ingalls, I think it's usually 30 vendors a year, and this is where we could show the floor plan if that's of interest, that shows the location of the various vendors, either now or at a future time. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And the building, is it used year round or just during the time of the fair?
That's another great question. So the primary use of the Vermont Building is during this 17-day fair, usually towards the end, middle to end of September. There are work days and tours and opportunities to be in and out of the building for maintenance and repair and setup, but it's all related to the vendors' time during this 17-day fair window. So that's why the building's unheated. And it's sort of not set up as a year-round facility.
I think next year it's going to be used for Bobby Starr's committee room. Okay.
Probably
Jess.
won't make it back in the afternoon then, Jeff.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure, Jess, if you have any additional conversation. I noted I also have Joe Aja and Jeremy Stevens on for this afternoon. I don't know if either of you want to contribute to this conversation. Now would be a good time to speak up. I can't see everybody.
Mr. Chairman, Dick McCormick,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
First,
Go
I
ahead.
want to apologize for before. My excuse is I actually got a plumber to come to the house. I couldn't very well send him away. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, many years ago in my musician days, I played at the Big E, and if I remember, the room I played in actually had harness. I'm not sure it was a race. I think they were just sort of parading, but it was harness horses parading. That was not in this building, I presume.
The horse barn.
That's a separate building. Okay. Does Vermont own that too, or is that just part of the Big E?
So Senator McCormick, I'm not an expert on all of the Big E infrastructure, but this is the only building that Vermont manages and owns, and the rest of the layout outside of the Avenue of the States is very much a fair sort of setting. So there's animal barns, and again, so there's the larger fairground view shot, but there's lots of fair food and rides and all the performance areas indoors and outdoors that you might expect at a fair. Very agricultural in many aspects still, though.
Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Joe Aja, Jeremy Stevens, anybody want to kick in?
Mr. Chair, Jeremy Stevens, BGS. Good
Yes, sir.
afternoon to you and the rest of the committee. Thank you for having us this afternoon. Good to see everybody and looking forward to seeing you again in person one day, hopefully soon. I personally do not have anything to add to this presentation. Just thank you again for your time.
Okay, Alex or whoever's got control of the screen, could we take that down at this point? Oddly enough, as you were going through all the testimony, the building's facade struck a bell with me, and I'm now realizing that I think it was also 1929, Linden Institute's main campus building was built, and I'm wondering if the same architect designed both buildings because they look an awful lot alike. I'll throw that out to Eric Philcorn
Is that another research project?
research project for the weekend.
All right.
I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon. As I said earlier, we don't technically have the bill yet, and I'm sure numbers are going to change. But we may end up having you come back and talk some more about the little finer points of what the House has done that you think might have been a mistake. We love flagging those things for the benefit of keeping up our humorous competition with the House. So should that happen, feel free to reach out and let us know, and we'll get you back in. Thank you all for the education on the Big E.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for your time today.
Have a great weekend.
Thank
We're
you.
going to shift gears now over to the Vermont Agricultural Fairs Association. Jackie Folsom is back with us. And Jackie, let me say, you weren't on the screen before. We were lamenting the fact that we're not going to get our little individual bottles of maple syrup from you because we're all remote. But while you're here, I should tell you that lots of times the senators will get those little bottles of maple syrup and they'll end up in the drawers in the committee room.
I grab them and bring them home and sell
And well, you didn't get them all because I got one from your drawer.
them. There you go.
I just want to let you guys know I have them all in the back room here.
Thanks a
whatever I
lot.
found in the committee room. So, Jackie, welcome to Senate Institutions. I know you know everybody here. I'm not sure you've heard my speech on folks presenting to us over YouTube. So let me just give you the briefest part. When we're talking on YouTube, we have an audience that we do not have any idea of what their background is or who they are. They could be school kids, whatever the case may be. I don't think you're going to present anything that will bring in little acronyms that we've become familiar with ourselves, but to the general public, they may not know or understand what that means. So if you get interrupted in your testimony, that may be simply because I'm trying to keep everything at a level where virtually everybody can understand. But welcome back. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, tell us how you fit into this picture for the benefit of our YouTube audience.
Thank you very much, Senator Benning. So my name is Jackie Folsom, and I'm the lobbyist for the Vermont Fairs and Field Days Association. And in full disclosure, I'm also a trustee from the state of Vermont for Eastern States Exposition. So I was very interested in hearing the conversation. And even before I was a trustee, I actually worked down at the fair for Cabot Creamery. And I can tell you that, well, this was probably 20 years ago, but that building really needs assistance just for the safety of the people that are working there, the safety of the people that are coming in, and the way that it presents Vermont. I think the agency's got a tough row to hoe trying to find money and keep it going. And it's always a challenge because it's only open for those 17 days. But as a trustee for Eastern States, I will tell you that the others are only open those 17 days also, and we all have the same conversations about it. But because they're not insulated, it's a real challenge to try to figure out what else to do with them. But they do make a marvelous presentation. And if you do get the opportunity to go down and visit, either during the fair or in between, I'd really love to be a part of that so we could talk about how important that is. And thank you for the issue on the acronyms. I was just in Senate Ag this morning with Senator Parent listening to a climate change discussion. And by the time that got done, I thought my head was going to explode because I couldn't figure out 90% of what anybody was talking about because they're just so used to speaking in that word speak that they use. So I think that's a good rule. So, excuse me, I'm here to give you an update on the fairs. Thank you very much for the $300,000 capital grants fund that we received this year and presumably next year. We just barely got done with reviewing the capital grants, and Senator Mazza, we missed you last Tuesday, but we knew you were with us in spirit. So we had 10 fairs that applied for the money. It actually totaled more than the 300,000 that was allocated. And so that's a good thing because it shows that they're working. One of the things I always advise the fairs to do is to make sure that when they are asking for these grants, that they are building upon either a 3 or a 5-year capital maintenance plan so that you can, so when they come in to show you what they have done, you can see the value of what they have done in the past and how they're building on what they need in the future. So we are planning on coming in on February 16th. Don't know whether we're going to be live or Zoomed. I have made a commitment to the House and Senate Ag committees to bring in those little gifts of nips or to find a way to get them to all of you. So are you in the same room, Senator Benning, or have you moved also?
Well,
Don't give them to him.
We should
Grace
be
will
in the
never
same
get 'em.
room. However, yesterday, as we were on the screen, we had the House Committee's chair, Alice Emmons, come in to testify about the subject we were talking about. And I was looking at the background and I'm thinking to myself, that looks awfully familiar. And then she got a wry smile on her face and lifted up my Senate nameplate. Obviously, she was sitting in my seat. So the answer to your question of whether we're going to be back in our room, I haven't the foggiest idea right now.
My
Hopefully
goodness.
so.
Well, we will track you down individually. How's that? I'll make sure that you get one of those somehow. We know how much they're appreciated. And whether we come back in Zoom or not, or in person, we'll make the effort to get that to happen. One of the things that is concerning for the fairs, and I think I've mentioned this last year, is the fact that 3 of the fairs, the Champlain Valley, Addison, and Rutland, are all on that 3-acre list for water quality issues. And Champlain Valley Expo has got 33.73 acres that are involved. And Addison has got 19.75, Rutland's got 17.39 acres. Beyond the fact that they're all now trying to find funding to hire an engineer, apparently along with that 3-acre rule or the law that got passed, there is a fee that each of these groups have to pay yearly. And it's based on $160 an acre. So CVE currently is paying about $5,000 just for the privilege of being on that list and having to go forward and try to figure out what they're going to do about the challenges that they're facing. And I think Tim Shea has talked to you before that it's going to be upwards of $1 million or so just to fix what they have to fix at that fair. Addison and Rutland are also paying a fee of approximately $2,500 each also. And this comes on top of the fact that, you know, they're not raising ticket prices. They're just getting back into the swing of what happened to them in 2020 when none of them held a fair. And so it's a real challenge. And I'm just raising the issue of if there's some way that they can be helped, it would be amazingly wonderful, because we haven't even gotten to the other side of the state yet, which will catch Franklin County, Orleans, Addison, Caledonia, and the rest of, and Connecticut River down in Bradford. And we're not talking about fairs that have a lot of money, as you well know. I don't need to explain to you how our fairs work, because they've come in and talked to you and they've done an excellent job in presentation. But these things are going to be challenging. And I did see in the governor's budget that he proposed putting some money in that would be made available for these projects. However, there's going to be that 3-acre list just on the west side of the state is 42 pages long. So there is not enough money in the world, I don't think, to help all of them with that. So I will just put that out there.
Senator Ingalls has a hand up.
Yes, sir.
It would seem like we could come together as a legislative body and figure out that the fairs can't afford that. And there's going to be some reasonableness, I would think, as far as these impervious surfaces and runoff and all of that. And I would hope that we could do that, but I don't know.
I would appreciate that. I hope you could too.
Senator Parent, I believe, is on the Natural Resources Committee. Senator McCormick, are you on that committee as well?
I'm on agriculture, Joe.
Well, you're on agriculture now. Okay.
I am on natural resources.
And I'm going to have a bigger ask for Franklin County than stormwater. I think at some point we'll have to talk to V-Trans. We're going to start laying the groundwork to potentially find a new plot of land for the Franklin County Field Days.
Interesting.
So that's a discussion at some point. Jackie probably won't bring up, but I just want to keep planting that seed.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but now that you have, I will say that I've been talking with the folks at Franklin County Fair, and I really offline, Senator Parent, like to talk to you about that situation. So maybe we can get in touch.
Senator McCormick, there's got to be a way to amend that statute to incorporate these fairs. And I'm just throwing that out there that we may have overreached.
Joe, I mean, the interesting part on stormwater, I know because I work for a municipality that just had to put a stormwater utility in. Everyone's included. I mean, the town of St. Albans charges the state for their roads that run through the town of St. Albans. They pay a fee to the town for this. So I think that instead of exempting them, I think we're better off to find the money and just get the stormwater work done for them, because that's our TMDL, which is a federal guidelines on water quality. So I think it's going to be more of us stepping up and paying for it.
But there comes a time in life when you look at a situation.
It's out of our, it's an EPA federal thing.
I know, but there comes a time in life where you look at
We're like the
something,
school
you
board. We
say-
gotta like do the rules up the hill.
But there just comes a time in life where you look at something and say, that just doesn't make sense to spend that type of money to satisfy something that you could probably get an exemption on if everybody put their collective reasonable heads together.
The TMDL situation, I'm very familiar with, having spent my first term on natural resources. And I'm thinking that there has to be a way to analyze the actual impact of a limited number of plots of property that are all under the FAIRs, and figure out if there isn't a way to demonstrate what the impact is on the TMDL limitations, and see if we can't carve out some kind of an exception there. But this isn't really for our committee's discussion all the way around. I'm just throwing that out there, that it's something to continue thinking about. Because Jackie, I know you're all coming back and asking us for more money at some point in time, and this has something to do with that. Senator McCormick.
Thanks. We're past the deadline this year for introducing bills, but if someone's offering language as an amendment to some ongoing legislation under consideration, we could take a look at it. But I mean, you do understand that Senator Parent is absolutely right that we are bound by federal law, but also that the federal law is not just a nuisance. I mean, it addresses what is in fact a problem, and provides beneficial protections. But if there's some way to actually achieve the desired goal, consistent with federal law and consistent with our environmental needs, certainly the committee would consider it. Chairman Bray is very accommodating.
Addison County's in his district, the fair.
Yep.
They have talked to him. They have talked to him. And, you know, and it's not to say that we don't recognize that this is something that's necessary. The challenge, I think, is that when you look at the U Mall, that has got 39.84 acres of impervious surface compared to CVE, which has got 33. So they're pretty close when you think about it. The challenge for us is looking at the U Mall, that is all concrete and rooftops. When you look at the CVE, that is not the case. They have 33 acres of impervious surface, but there's a lot of open land there, as with the other fairs. And I think one of the things that's missing here is there a way to maybe give the fairs credit for the other land that they're using that absorbs the water and does the right thing as far as a TMDL, besides the fact that, and I know this isn't an issue for EPA, but the challenge for the fairs is, you know, the U Mall simply will raise the rates for their renters. We don't have that option. And so fiscally, that is never a concern when you're dealing with these things, but it is a degree of inequity when you look at it that way. So anyhow, that's my spiel on that.
And I probably should have prefaced the remarks by saying to the YouTube audience, Lake Champlain has a pollution problem that we need to address. There's no question about that. Federal government is overseeing our responsibilities with respect to that pollution. So rules have been thrust out there with respect to what's called impervious surfaces. Basically, I like to think of it as hard enough surface so that the water's not sinking in, it's running off. And the upshot is that what the federal government has in trying to correct that problem, they have left us with certain things that I'm not sure anybody intended for consequences. And I think that it is important to keep the conversation going to make sure we accomplish both the needs, in this case, of the fairs, as well as cleaning up the lake. Jackie, I did have a question, and that is the demo derbies. How'd they go?
It went very well, thank you. We got past all that. Lauren Hibbert over at the Secretary of State's office worked with the three fairs that were having challenges. So that was Orleans, Caledonia, and Rutland. And they were able to get changes made on the fairs so that the demo derbies are able to be held now successfully and very well attended. So that worked out very well, and we were much appreciative of that. One of the things that came up this year down in Rutland that we're now looking at for all the fairs is there was an issue with the fire chief down there who is new and who decided, well, I shouldn't say that, who is new and looked at the fire codes and discovered that perhaps there was not crowd management. There might be crowd management challenges in areas where they had to move people out quickly. And so Rutland County got caught in some of that. They did take certification through the fire marshal's office, and now we're looking at getting the word out to all the other fairs. So it always seems like, you know, on top of everything else we're doing, we're always trying to play catch up as to what's happening. But we had a meeting with the association last week, and we're all very aware of the situation and trying to figure out if we can get somebody from the division, I think it's the Division of Fire Safety, to come in and talk with the fairs and maybe give them a checklist of what they need to do so that we don't have this issue going forward. So things are looking up as far as that goes. And one of the things we've already been told is that there are quite a few of the fairs that are putting their capital grants money into building barns, because the availability, the supply chain, I'm sure you've all heard about that in various other areas. The supply chain of tents and porta potties and things like that are almost nil. And so they're having to resort to putting up buildings in places of where they used to have tents. And this is a big problem up in Champlain Valley Expo. Tim Shea's been saying that they're having trouble. It's more economical for tent companies to rent tents out for 2 weekends to 3 weddings than it is to rent them to one place at the Champlain Valley Expo for 2 weekends. And so he's running into challenges with that. So they will come through, they will figure it out, and we will keep going. But you know, we're very happy with the $300,000 allocation that we've received. Of course, we're always looking for more money for our fairs, and we wouldn't say no, but I don't have any express amount that I'm asking for right now. You just had a huge ask from the Eastern States groups, and you know, they're deserving of the funds too, and we're very aware of that. So we just appreciate everything you've done for us, and appreciate you listening to all the pluses and minuses.
Senator Ingalls.
As far as the grant, this isn't if you don't know, you don't know. So just something that I was going to ask earlier. What is the overall theme of the types of grants that, if you knew, what are the fairs asking for? What is their biggest need?
Well, as far as the capital grant, so I do happen to have the latest request here. Addison asked for, they're building a barn for a tractor display. Connecticut River Valley is building a barn. And please keep in mind, when they build these buildings, it also goes to added income for them, because they can rent space out during the off season. They also rent the buildings for weddings and other events, given COVID. Caledonia has been on a really aggressive program of replacing their cattle barns. And as somebody who showed in some of those years ago, thank God, because they were a real problem. They were interesting. Champlain Valley is replacing water and electrical infrastructure. So that's one thing that we've asked them to focus on also, because putting the electrical lines underground and also making sure they have bathroom facilities, which in some cases was not happening. Franklin is asking for lighting upgrades. Lamoille is doing repairs and lightings. Orleans County is looking at building a new barn. Rutland Fair is looking at fixing the roof on the 4-H building. If you've ever been down there, it's the big building that sits on the hill all the way across from the grandstand, and it's a beautiful old building. Tunbridge is actually working with Green Mountain Power to do power grades to the whole fairgrounds. And Bonneville, which is the Win Hall, and that is a sweet little fair. If any of you have ever been down there, it's really a nice fair. Excuse me. They are upgrading electrical systems down there. So you can see that they're all doing things to help make their grounds safer, more aesthetically better looking, and just make it a nice way for people to come in and enjoy their property. They've really been working, as I said earlier, on a 3 to 5 year plan so that they can build on what they've been doing and be able to show you all the value of what they've been doing. And these are grants that are matched. They have to have a 15% matching grant, either cash or in kind, from work with volunteers on the grounds.
So we're going to get more into the weeds on that when you all come back a couple of weeks from now.
Yes.
Anything else you wanted to tell us this afternoon?
I think I'm good. I just thank you for the opportunity, and I guess we'll know in a couple weeks if, well, yeah, 2 weeks, if we have to track you down or mail the nips into you, we'll figure it out.
Well, you
Except
don't- you
for
don't have to
Senator
put 'em-
Mazza.
You don't have to put them in individual nips. If you just put them in 1 gallon and send them to me, I'll make sure they all get theirs.
Send them to me.
Sure.
Oh, you're putting me in an awful spot, gentlemen. We'll figure something out.
All right. Uh-oh.
Thank
She
you very
called us
much.
gentlemen. She's calling us gentlemen. That must mean we're being insulted again.
No, we're just old.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by. We'll see you again in a couple
Thank
of
you.
weeks.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Committee, that's all I've got.